What is up, guys? This is Cody on The Real Sports Talk, bringing you the post-race video for the Food City 500 at Bristol. And this was a race that it had a lot of green flag racing, but it still had a lot of action since it was Bristol. As some call it, the world's fastest conveyor belt, just because there's cars all over the track and there's always passing in action, even if it isn't for position, just because the track's so small and it has 43 cars jammed onto it. The racetrack was very green because it had rained last night, but they did start the race on time. They got it dried. And AJ Allmendinger and Greg Biffle started on the front row. They each led some laps in this race. The big story, though, was I think it was like 6-car pileup, maybe 7. And that was on lap 20-something, I believe. And that included guys that people thought had a shot to win at this track today, like Kasey Kahne, who has had just a dreadful year so far, and Kyle Busch, who's also had a bad year. Marcus Ambrose, Kevin Harvick, Carl Edwards, and Regan Smith were all involved. It happened when Kasey Kahne came up off the corner, and Regan Smith just kind of stuck his nose between Kasey Kahne and the wall. And Kasey Kahne thought either he was clear or he thought Regan Smith would give him a little courtesy there, and he would give him the room to come up and slide up in front of him. Because Kahne had him cleared in the corner, but Smith got that run off the corner that we were talking about in the pre-race video. How that momentum on the outer line just carries, and Kahne just tried to pull up into the outer lane, and Smith was there, so Kasey just kind of got into the wall, got sideways, and collected a bunch of cars. And Brad Keselowski just barely got through this, and a lot of good cars were taken out. Guys like Kyle Busch, who had already picked up a handful of positions from his starting spot, and he was very frustrated when he got out of the car. This was a great chance for him to turn his not-so-good season so far in the Sprint Cup and in the Nationwide Series, too, around, and he was hoping to get a win today at Bristol, but that was not the case. And then after this stop, or after this caution, I guess, we had some guys stay out. Like I said, that in the pre-race video, that would be key, guys coming and staying out for track position, and that played out to their advantage. Guys like Brian Vickers, who drove the number 55 car with Mark Martin, taking his first break of the season from driving from Michael Waltrip Racing. And also his teammate Martin Truex Jr. stayed out, and Jeff Burton for Richard Childress Racing. And those guys all pretty much ended up finishing up front because they took that stop, or they didn't take a stop there. All but Martin Truex they were guys that stayed there throughout the race. Truex actually had an error on a pit stop, but he worked his way back through the field. He drove his way back up. He had a pretty good car today. Guys like Greg Biffle, AJ Allmendinger, as I said, led laps in this race. Vickers, who just came back from the complications with the blood clots he had last year. He wasn't able to race for a large portion of that season. And then Team Red Bull obviously did not exist through this season, so he was kind of an odd man out. He didn't have a ride, and he got to jump into this ride, and it was great to see him lead some laps today. And Matt Kenseth also led some laps, and Brad Keselowski was the dominating car toward the end of the race, and probably the strongest car as we moved forward throughout the race. I guess he was the strongest car. And another incident that happened today that was kind of tense when it happened, but it really kind of blew over, was the Dale Jr. Jeff Gordon incident. They were side by side. Gordon was on the high side, and they kind of touched a little bit. It didn't look like too much, but then Gordon spun out in the corner. What happened was his tire was completely flat because when they barely touched, the exhaust pipe from Dale Jr.'s car actually cut Jeff Gordon's tire. So that was an issue there, and he cut his tire, and he backed it into the fence, and he ended up finishing 35th in this race after looking like a car that could contend for the win. He needed that caution to catch back up to the leaders, but he obviously did not want to be the caution, and that was unfortunate for him. As I said, it was a very green flag race, and there were only 6 cautions in the whole 500 laps. That's even less than, it's about the same, I guess, laps to caution flags as in the Nationwide Series race. Obviously, there were more in this race, but there were only 300 laps in that race with the 4 cautions, so it's about the same ratio, but it was a very green flag race with some green flag pit stops, and it was very interesting to watch just because there was always action on the track, and that's what makes short tracks and Bristol great. There's always action on the track, even if it's not per position. And this new progressive banking at Bristol, there's multiple lines you can run, ways to make passes other than the bump and run, so it makes the racing more fun for the fans, I guess, and the drivers, too. And also more competitive because you can have that side-by-side racing. There were times today where we saw some three-wide racing for position, and that was quite tense in those times. But overall, it was a very entertaining race today, even though for a race that was green flag most of the time and there weren't very many cautions, especially at Bristol, you'd expect a lot more cautions with the frustrations. But it's kind of taken away that aspect of Bristol, guys getting hot heads and the high tempers, just because this progressive banking, and it allows for that racing and the multiple lines, so guys don't have to move each other out of the way. It was a great race today for Michael Waltrip Racing. They finished 3rd, 4th, and 5th. With the guys Clint Boyer, Martin Truex Jr., and Brian Vickers, obviously, the guy I mentioned earlier. And Jeff Burton came in 6th. It was a good day for him. The Ganassi cars, Jamie McMurray and Juan Pablo Montoya, came in 7th and 8th. And Jimmy Johnson came home in 9th, Paul Menard in 10th. Ryan Newman finished in 12th, the guy that was on the top of the speed charts this weekend throughout practice, and he was a guy that I was expecting to run a little better. Greg Biffle, our points leader, does stay in that top spot there in the points with his 13th place finish here at Bristol. And last year's champion, Tony Stewart, he finished 14th after his strong run, and that was just kind of a decent day for him. And Dale Earnhardt Jr., he ran up front a lot of the day, and on the last pit stop, he came in. He had, he sped on pit road, that was it. So he had to go to the back of the lead lap, the tail end of the lead lap. Some notables, Denny Hamlin, a guy that really looked like he was going to be strong with a win, and I believe that 4th place finish at Daytona. He finished 20th. Not the day he was looking for. He's kind of going downhill here. I'd expect him to be strong at Martinsville, though, in 2 weeks. And Kyle Busch, a guy that a lot of people were really looking toward this season as a possible champion, he finished 32nd, and that's something that he's obviously going to have to improve on. Jeff Gordon ran up front a lot of the day. Just couldn't get it done with that Dale Jr. incident with the tailpipe cutting the tire. And Gordon ended up finishing 35th, and his Hendrick Motorsports teammate, Casey Kane, ended up finishing 37th, excuse me. So, overall, okay day for Hendrick Motorsports. Not the finishes they were looking for, and obviously they're a little disappointed on this season. And as I said in the pre-race video, it was a case, I believe there were 4 cars that stayed out on the last pit stop with 20 to go or so, and those were the guys that pulled out to the lead. Front 2 being Matt Kenseth and Brad Keselowski, and I forget who else stayed out. I believe Brian Vickers was one of them. He finished in the top 5, and I think maybe Jeff Burton stayed out, but I'm not positive on that. So looking in the points, we got Greg Biffle and Kevin Harvick still at the top, and Matt Kenseth improved 2 positions. Martin Truex is up 4 positions to 4th, and Denny Hamlin's down 2 after his down day. Earnhardt Jr.'s down 2 to 6th after his day. Last year's champion Tony Stewart staying in 7th position. Clint Boyer moving up 6 spots in the Michael Waltrip Racing Toyota there to 8th position in the points, and that's a great run for Michael Waltrip Racing, obviously. And he's got a couple guys in the top 8 in the points now, so that's something that I'm sure Michael's really happy about, and he's happy for Brian Vickers as well after giving him that opportunity. The guy no one's really talking about, Paul Menard, is in the 10th position in the points, and Jeff Burton is Richard Childress Racing teammate right behind him in 11th, picking up 4 spots this weekend. Brad Keselowski with this win. I think this might be the win that gets him back on track and into that championship form that people were predicting he could be in. And I'd expect him to be strong for the rest of the season now, because he's one of the guys I thought at the beginning of the season really had a shot at winning this championship. So look for him to be strong from here on out. This can kind of be a catapult for him. Carl Edwards really went down today in the points. He finished in that poor position that he got, and he ended up dropping to 14th in the points. He 8 positions in the points just today, and that's obviously not what Carl's looking for, the runner-up in the chase last year. And you got to wonder if Carl's ever going to come back from that, or if it's going to take him a little bit, because Denny Hamlin, after he lost his championship there to Jimmy Johnson, he had a poor year, and it looked like he was getting back on track this year with Darian Grubb as his crew chief, but we're going to have to just wait and see how that goes with the 2 guys, Carl Edwards and Denny Hamlin, who looked to possibly be strong. Carl Edwards was another favorite coming in, Kyle Busch drops 3 positions in the points to 15th. Mark Martin, obviously not racing this week, drops 6 positions. Jimmy Johnson, Juan Montoya, and Jamie McMurray all up 6 positions to 17th, 18th, and 19th in the point standings. As for some more notables, Jeff Gordon, 23rd in the standings, 6 positions down in the points after this week. He's 72 points out. And Casey Kane, another guy, he's very frustrated because he feels he's had some of the fastest cars at the racetracks the last few weeks, and he's had awful luck, or he's driven it into the wall, or things of that nature. I'd expect Kane to get some wins this season, but I don't know at this point if he can bounce back and get to the chase. I know he has some fast cars, and he's a great race car driver, but we're just going to have to see. He's 100 points out now, and that's something that's going to be very difficult to overcome, because that's more than 2 races that he is behind the leader now. We're looking forward to Fontana next week. I'll have a pre-race video for you here, right on The Real Sports Talk.